Here's a picture of a wheel and axle. A wheel and axle consists of, wait for it, a wheel, which you see here in blue, and an axle, this part that you see here in red. Got the wheel and we got the axle. A wheel and axle can be said as though the wheel is a lever arm and that's fixed to the shaft being the axle. Let me illustrate how this is actually a lever. At the fulcrum here in the center, then you have the lever coming out to the outside of the wheel, and then one of two things is happening. Either on the outside of the shaft is either the effort force, and then the outside of the wheel is the resistance force, or it's vice versa. The orange part can be the effort, and the blue part can be the resistance. What we call this is we call the driver and what's driven. In other words, normally if you have a wheel and an axle, when I say normally, what most people think of, like a tire, a wheel like this on this kind of this wood carrying thing, whatever that is. The motor is going to be attached to the axle. So the axle is, in this case, the driver. And because the axle is moving, that causes the wheel to move. So we call the wheel here what's driven. The axle is driving the wheel. But it's not always that way. Let me give you an example of a time where the wheel is driving the axle. Steering wheel. That's a great example of the wheel driving the axle. Imagine here that you are sitting in this car and you get your hands wrapped around the steering wheel. Apparently your hands are on the wrong arm, according to my drawing. That's an awesome drawing. And you're turning the steering wheel left and right. Your outside of the wheel there that your hands are on is driving the axle. So in this case, the wheel is driving the axle. Labeling this is the driver, and then the axle in the center is what's being driven. The wheel is driving the axle. Here's another example of the wheel driving the axle. You grab a hold of this knob and you turn it. Because you're turning it, that forces the axle to turn. So in this case we have driver and we have what's driven. Wheel is driving the axle. Here's the last example. In this case, this is the axle driving the wheel once again. We have some type of a motor here that's attached to this axle. And then the axle here is rotating. And because it's rotating, it's going to cause the wheel to rotate. So here we have the axle is the driver, and the wheel is what's being driven.